I think talking about 10 years of Licensing Live, 10 years ago, Licensing Live was all about, mostly about technology. Yeah, you had a licensing problem, and then there was a technical solution for it. And we saw that Viavi earlier. Yeah, the old licensing solution was this cryptic dongle. Yeah, and then the new licensing solution was a different dongle. Yeah, and today we talk about software monetization and licensing, and its processes and goals and philosophy and transformation and business objectives and alignment and, of course, changes, yeah, change management. And we have a few change agents here on the panel, some of you that you have seen already today. I have a few questions prepared that I want to ask them at any time. If you feel you want to ask a question, please also raise your hand, and I try to include you. But maybe before we go, let's have a quick round of introduction. I'll ask you to introduce yourself, maybe your name and company, what function you're from, and what change you wanted to drive or have driven. Yeah?
Great. Hi, I'm Tom Minifie. I'm with AVST. We're a software company focusing in the unified communications space, and we've been a Gemalto customer for a number of years. I'm the CTO at our company, and there was a discussion about C-level guys. I'm not sure I wanted to admit that, but I'm one of the good ones, okay? We're a relatively small company, so within my organization, I've got IT, I've got the development organization, and QA, and some of the operations folks. So really the change that I was driving, we moved from a perpetual use license into a subscription license. We sell through channel, and so it was really implementing that change both internally as well as with our channel as well as with our customers.
Thank you.
That's a tough act to follow. Vince Jannelli, I work at Sharp in the US operation. I'm responsible for software product management, and kind of a sphere of influence includes IT and operations because the plumbing just isn't right in a hardware-based organization. We are primarily B2B focused. I think that's the key thing, because a lot of times when people think of Sharp, they think of TVs and microwaves, and that's another group in another area with another set of problems.
Hi everyone, I'm Bill Graber, and I'm from Trimble Inc. It used to be Trimble Navigation, but we recently changed our name to Trimble Inc., so that's a change that I'm trying to manage recently. But you know, it was a couple years ago, and it was hard to say Gemalto because it kept saying SafeNet, so it's not quite as dramatic of a change. But so I'm a marketing director for Trimble, and really I'm not a marketing director anymore. I'm more of an e-commerce director, so I manage e-commerce for the channel for Trimble, and now we are embarking on EMS because you know a shopping cart and subscriptions don't go terribly well together. So we're in the process of trying to modify a lot of our e-commerce modeling to deal with temporary licenses.
My name's Jim Kelley. I'm with Viavi Solutions, Operations Engineering Manager. Most of my function has to do with developing test for hardware. Viavi's products are predominantly hardware with software functionality. We have some software-only products, and that's where licensing has always been a part of Viavi's history. Licensing has always sort of been a red-haired stepchild for the company, and what I've been trying to drive is, one, standardization to get us all to use the same set of tools, and two, legitimizing it to make it something other than a red-headed stepchild, so that we make this visible, that is used by all the various divisions in the company, and we can start to come to some sort of efficiencies.
Hi, I'm Sora Naeem. I'm from Juniper Networks. I run an organization called Enterprise Business Operations and Transformation, and I have migrated across a lot of the operational roles inside Juniper, including supply chain and engineering. But our connection to Gemalto started when I was working in engineering. Today, we have a much broader scope that we are incubating the capabilities around monetizing the software and the licensing, and there's a licensing team now in my team. But we also run an enterprise portfolio and a couple of other good things that you'll hear more about tomorrow because I didn't present yet. but looking forward to that.
Okay, I can keep it pretty short. I just presented. So Jeroen Peeters, Philips, part of the Global Business Process Owner Organization. Eventually, that lines up into our COO. So I'm part of operations, but really focusing on improving our capabilities and driving harmonization globally.
Okay, so we have somehow you've huddled 3 people more from operations engineering, yeah? Then, yeah, exactly. And then we have marketing, product management, engineering, if I can say, yeah, in a bigger picture. Would you all say your function is the right function to be the change engine for software monetization process, or would you actually say, yeah, I drove this because I drove this, but I see the best natural owner is this or that function, yeah? Anyone with a view?
So having been in multiple organizations, I would say it's very specific to the company and where the change where you can find the best leadership support for that change, but also the right skill set and where you can pull those users and players together in order to drive the change. So it may be very process oriented and therefore more operational. It may be coming from more of a strategic marketing place. So I think there's not one right answer. And I certainly think that we probably all need to engage with people across the business in order to facilitate the change.
Yeah, I would second that. Organization and organisms, you know, same kind of root. I don't know if it's Greek or Latin, that's beyond me, but they're all individual. And so depending on your organization, where the change occurs and who drives it is contingent upon that individuality of the organization. The other thing I will say, and it's, you know, I'm sitting next to a CTO guy, right? C-level. He doesn't like me saying that, but you do need a strong champion. And then who doesn't do the work, by the way? And then the question is, who's foolish enough to lead the charge? And that's where it ends up falling.
Yeah, I think the only addition I would make is that the demand does start generally from new propositions, right, and solutions that we're going to design for the customer. So I think, you know, the demand generates from product management, from, let's say, more the strategic portfolio process. I think the ownership should be there. However, that has been used as an excuse for operations in many organizations to wait for that to come to them versus being part of that strategic discussion about what should our supply chains look like in the future. And I think that is something that I think the driver should be from where the proposition generates from, but we need to be much more proactive from an operations perspective to support that. Because once they know what the product is, you're too late. That's basically it.
I guess it's pretty obvious that you have to involve product management in some shape or form if you run a licensing project, yeah, engineering, because they, at a minimum, they have to integrate some technology, yeah, operations, yeah, because they have to run this whole ship otherwise. What other functions do you find are key stakeholders in the organization you had to get on board? Yeah.
One of the toughest sells that we've been dealing with is getting finance on board. And being able to produce a credible ROI for the investment that goes into signing a contract with Gemalto or one of the other third-party companies, we've not been able to come up with those numbers. And it was only by virtue of the fact that, as it has been mentioned, we tend to grow by acquisition, and so we came to the realization a few years back that we had 2 contracts with Gemalto, 2 different divisions within our company were paying Gemalto for their services. We also had a contract with Flexera, and we were paying them. And it was only when I was able to go and say, here's all that we're spending, let's at least get it down to 1, and I think we can justify the expense of going through and standardizing this. I couldn't. There was nothing that I could do on paper that says we're going to see this much more in sales, we're going to see this much more in revenue as a result of it. It was just cleanup of existing processes. And so getting finance on board and getting them to understand the intrinsic value of standardization and process efficiency, that was one of the biggest challenges that we faced.
Understand. I get to that in a second. I think we can elaborate more on that. You want to say?
Yeah, for my company, I can't name a group that isn't involved. Because this, I mean, it's so far-reaching, it impacts our customers, impacts our partners, that every single person within our organization is customer-facing to some degree. And at some point during this process, they're going to be faced with that question of, so why are you guys doing this? You know, there's change involved here, and I don't understand it. Why are you doing it? And so everyone needs to be equipped with, you know, the corporate answer of why are we doing this? Why are we implementing this change? Why are we putting everyone through this? So for us, it's organization wide that needs to understand the project and, you know, the why behind that project and the benefits to all involved. So for us, it's company wide.
How about IT? Was that an issue for anyone to get them on board?
No, this is our IT group has really embraced the platform. In fact, they're managing a group of applications called enterprise applications, and EMS is now an enterprise application. And just recently, EPP was named an enterprise application. So they seem to be doing a very good job of embracing it and helping manage the platform in the right direction. We also have another group of engineers that has set up a group themselves, as they call themselves TPaaS, which is Trimble Products as a Service. And they're doing a good job to build, they call it an API manager, or it's just a bunch of wrappers, right? A bunch of API around the EMS platform that we can use. In fact, we can use those API layers or whatever to get licenses out of EMS and to move stuff around. And I think there's about 30 of them now, 30 different APIs that are wrapped around this EMS platform. And then we also set up a new group that I'm involved in called Distribution Services, which is specifically, we live to try and make it easier to buy from Trimble, whether it's a channel or direct. But so there's really kind of three pieces that have come into play associated with corporate IS and moving the platform.
We had a pretty significant sea change occur when we brought on board a new CIO. The company had not had that role filled previously, and we struggled in trying to get any support from the IT team to use Gemalto and to get it connected with any of our other systems. When our CIO came on board, Calvin Dodt, he had Gemalto experience in previous lifetimes, and he was a very big supporter. And he happened to be in the middle of a large-scale exercise to overhaul all of our front office and back office enterprise tools. And so we were able to get Gemalto pulled into that conversation, and that's made a significant difference. We now have IT folks who are dedicated to supporting us in much, as you just described, in getting us connected to the other various tools that we're using.
Great. Sora, yeah.
I would say that from the get-go, IT was a central player in our transformation efforts. They were very much a partner, whether it was from a process architecture and how we connect into SAP. They helped us put in the plumbing in order to deploy EMS. There was definitely places where they took a step back, where we ended up having to fill some of that. But we also had a very strong support from the engineering infrastructure team. So it was really a very broad partnership in order to make it happen. But there was never, without IT, I don't think we could have done what we've done, or has come as far as we have. I think they've been a core player. I think that in the beginning, the challenge was getting all of the end-to-end process people to really buy into the value of being involved, as well as all of the product teams from within both engineering and PLM to be supportive of the impact it has on each of their teams. So I think we had more resistance in some of those pockets.
And it comes through that you had to work with different functions, different stakeholders, or almost everybody in the company, all the functions. Would you say you worked with one uniform message? This is why we are doing it. This is our objectives, and that's what you use to get everybody on board? Or did you have a tailored one and said, here are the benefits for product management, and here are the benefits for operations, and here are the benefits for IT, and here are the benefits for finance, revenue recognition, and you had different messages to different people? Any opinion on that one?
Well, I'll jump in on that one, because we had a consistent message, but the delivery was different. So, we want everybody to see the same thing. But if I'm talking to IT, I'm talking about how am I making your life better? If I'm talking to a product person, I'm talking about flexibility in the licensing, trying to get them to understand that they can do more. If I'm talking to, well, sales is the one group that no one mentioned yet. And in our particular...
Forget about sales.
Yeah. Because in our group, we haven't touched sales yet in a significant way. I would say that's because, you know, the 5%, the impact, they don't feel it. But like looking ahead, I see that as a significant challenge for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I would coach you to get them on board quick, because it hurts when they're not on board.
I agree.
Yeah, but I think that, you know, change is one thing, but your messaging is kind of what is your imperative and what are you trying to transform. Maybe you should be unified, and it has been, but I think that when you're looking at each of your stakeholders, you do need to cater to what is changing in their world. And I think actually for us, the field has been actually the hardest, because you have to pay attention to account managers and partner managers, and they all behave a little differently, and they have different problems, and they have different worries. And you need to have a message that not only caters to the sales organization or the go-to-market organization, but to each of those different players within that organization. So you do have to listen to them and give them the answers that they need, but you also need to solicit from them what they're worried about, so that you can make sure when you're designing and solving, you're taking that into account to get to the right results.
Mm-hmm. Tom, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just real quickly. I would agree with all that there needs to be that underlying, you know, here's the reason behind that we're doing this, and kind of at that steering committee or decision-making entity that's involved with actually making the decision, that discussion's a little different, and you're formulating that reason. But then as you're meeting with all the different departments, the discussion does change, because they have different interests, different viewpoints, and frankly, they weren't involved with the actual decision to move forward with this. And so with them, it's very, very important to get them on board with, you know, why are we doing this? And that's been the key for our organization.
Got you. Jim, you made the point of the ROI and not having one and so on. And that's something that resonates well with me in sales. Yeah, we deal with many projects out there simultaneously, and not every opportunity where we speak to someone who wants to do a licensing project gets to a licensing project. My biggest concern is not whether I'm the chosen partner in a licensing project. My biggest concern is there a licensing project, yeah? And does it really take off? And in the last year or so, we have worked more and more with our customers to help them build an ROI if they didn't have one already, yeah? And be their sparring partner in building a business case. So again, what's your opinion? You said for you this concept was fundamental. Was the fact, or what was the decision making more around ROI? I see the numbers, so yes, I'm going to approve the project, or was it a strategic vision? I want to go somewhere, and the numbers are second priority. Yeah. Well, how would you describe that? Yeah.
For us, we had a body of product that already had licensing, and so when I was bringing this to the table to say that, one, we could cut some money out of our spend by streamlining this, and two, we need to keep spending money. We had the advantage of product that we couldn't turn off. So I was never faced with a question of, do we want to stay using licensing of any kind, because it was obvious that we had to keep things going. We had product we have to support. The investment to go standardize and the investment to tie our licensing solution into the rest of our infrastructure, that's where we couldn't come up with a hard black and white ROI that said this is why it makes sense. And it wasn't until we tried multiple different approaches to get the buy-in from IT and from the other bodies that were going to have to go invest in the process, that we joined partners, became partners with our new CIO, who was going to be overhauling the entire front and back office suite. And that was being able to put the Gemalto activities in as a part of that overall project. made it a non-issue for us. We got as part of that strategy. So it was, again, not a hard black and white, we're going to make this much back on that much of an investment, but this is the vision of where we want to get to in the future, and e-commerce was a piece of that, and automation was a piece of that, and we have to do this to make that work.
So that was more on the vision, yeah?
Absolutely.
Jeroen and Philips, could you put an ROI, a business case, yeah, on this, or was it also more strategic?
Well, it started very strategic. So we said, okay, you know, I think we have like 6 or 7 licensing management systems going around across the businesses. We wanted to do this harmonization and standardization. We wanted a certain customer experience. We were very deliberate in you know, doing an analysis across the suppliers that are out there with that maturity level to deal with a company like Philips, and we made that selection. However, that led to positioning of, you know, of Gemalto as part of our target architecture and part of our target processes. But now to drive the adoption, you know, now we need to get further into the business case, because the systems that we have running maybe cost 50,000 euros a year to run. You know, making that shift to the investment to actually use out-of-the-box tools like Gemalto is a big investment, but a good investment. So we know that it needs to be done. I think the main challenge is that, you know, because the benefits actually span across functions, but the person paying for it is not seeing all the benefits, we're now trying to drive a business case that covers, let's say, all the benefits across these functions, and that drives funding of one of those functions to actually be able to pay the bill for this capability. So it started strategic, but in the end, the numbers still matter, because, you know, it is a big deal, and somebody needs to pay for it in the organization. Luckily, the pilot with ultrasound, you know, they're very willing to pay for it, and they see the benefit from the get-go. Other businesses know they need it, but they haven't figured out yet how to fund it and how to drive that. So yes, the numbers matter, for sure.
How did you pick the unlucky function that had to fund it of all the functions that benefited it? Yeah?
Well, I mean, we haven't, so naturally, because, you know, Gemalto is a software delivery and an entitlement delivery engine, we said, well, this is a operations capability, right? So we said, okay, this is, yes, R&D uses it, you know, it's integrated in their products, and yes, service uses it, but the real accountability, if we cannot deliver to our customers, who needs to pick, you know, who do they call? They call our COO, and they say, your supply chain for software is not working, what are you going to do about it? And that is kind of how we drove the thinking around who's going to own it. But of course, in the business groups themselves, we need to make sure that all these head of operations can you know, actually afford it and drive that going forward.
Gotcha. Bill, at Trimble, I understand you're adding product line by product line, yeah, with software monetization strategies, yeah, and the licensing concept. Does everyone have to produce a business case, or is it also more strategic direction? Yeah,
Yeah, you know, there's some business cases, and some of the business cases are fairly easy to do, but a lot of the things there was one in particular that I'd like to just talk about. Some of it is just feedback from the dealers or feedback from the customers. In this one particular case, there was a site manager of a road project, right? And so he was in this trailer, you know, they're in these trailers on these sites, right? Well, the whole side of the trailer was like white wall. And he had all the machines written down on the whiteboard, 100 machines, and for each machine, what hardware was on the machine, and what version of firmware, what, you know, the software is on the machine, and what licenses were on the machine, and the warranty, you know, the warranty end date and everything. And then all the people that were on the site he had to have. So he had all this stuff, and he was doing it all manually. And he just said, hey, is there any way that you can automate this for me? I mean, this is what I want. And so that was really the driver of that particular deal. Even though it wasn't really ROI based, it was dealer driven or customer driven. And so a lot of the times it's a dealer driven scenario. And then we try and build a use case behind it or a business case behind it.
Okay, thank you. Sora, you want to add something?
Yeah, I would just add that at Juniper, it started as a CO imperative. So we had clearly the C-level engagement. But as it started, I was working in engineering, and engineering really took full ownership of the cost of the engagement, and continues to support that as we go forward. So it is a central funding, and then the licensing team is driving more of the strategy of the how, the what, in what order, and what benefits that we get. Obviously, always looking for, I think in one of your previous, maybe it was yours, sessions where you talk about bring some value so people can continue to get buy-in. I think that as part of driving good change is people are appreciating that, oh, good job. Okay, what next? And trying to continue to get that, and that helps facilitate the buy-in as you're driving the change and the transformation. But from where the Uber level, it has to, I think it has to have, I think it's works well coming from a centralized place.
Okay. If you look at the amount of work as a change agent you have to drive the change, would you say more work has to be done until the decision is being made to do a project, yeah, kind of in the internal pre-sales phase, or does the most of the work happen after the decision is made and you get into implementation mode? Where did you see the bulk of the work for you? Yeah.
After. So very clearly, people are, if you present it well and you position it well, people, and the funding is there, they'll say yes. But then the tough part starts, right? Because that's when they start realizing where the impact is, because you start running into roadblocks, you start running into discussions, you start running into different perspectives on how that change should take place. And that is, I think, where the bulk of the work comes afterwards, because it's not just about the change itself and I would say the reasoning behind it and the validity of it, but it's also different opinions about how that change should take place. And that happens continuously as you onboard more stakeholders. You get more and more dynamics of people with opinions of how this should be done, and not only engage with you on the outcome. So I think that management happens more after the project is kicked off than before, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Heavy nodding from everyone here, I find.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of work up front to get it kicked off and approved. But I could say a few choice words, but I won't. It's you have no idea of the amount of work that comes after. And I think a lot of the work is not because you have to organize your thoughts and understand what your business process is, and talk to people to get their input. Even going out to the channel and reaching out to them and getting their feedback in. But it's because there's resistance. And that, for me, that's the most frustrating part, is because it's already a lot of work, but then just to overcome the natural friction that's in there just adds a whole nother layer of effort. But it is an exercise in patience. So there is a personal growth that comes out of it.
Yeah, and actually, when you start picking people to do this stuff, you really have to pick people with just a hint of crazy, because it is, everybody needs to be relentless and just keep plowing through and keep, answering the same questions and keep going. So yeah, that's a big deal.
So the good news for everyone here that isn't gone through it only gets worse, right? That's my summary, yeah?
I would just also add an interesting thought. As you're transforming, you're also starting to run the business. So as you build the infrastructure to transform, make sure you're ready to catch how you manage it and how you deploy it and how you run it, and when your customers start engaging, who answers their questions. So you really need to have the right infrastructure to run what you deploy. And I think that's a really important part. I think one of the things that we designed well is the same team that transforms is the team that runs it. And I think that, as we bring the expertise to the table of people who have licensing background and people who have execution, business operations background, and program management background, that tie all the pieces together. So you need kind of all different kinds of players. And most recently, we've added someone into that licensing team who's actually more of a product line management type resource and skill. So you really need to have a diverse set of players to both transform and run the business. And you can probably do it with a small set. We're certainly doing it with a small set. But it's a creative set, right? Because you have to turn the switch to transform right now, but then turn around and make sure you're addressing the run the business workload at the same time.
Got you. Vince mentioned resistance. Yeah. Did you meet any obstacles? Just curious. Yeah. And how did you overcome them? Yeah. What were your biggest obstacles on the way? Yeah.
Well, I want to abstract. So our particular situation was unique because, as I mentioned earlier, we're a subsidiary trying to drive a change in a parent structure and across affiliates, right? So I'm just going to focus on the subsidiary because I think that's the more common experience for everyone. And so there's always going to be resistance because there's just believers and non-believers, right? People want to go in a different direction regardless of what the steering committee says, right? I mean, it's a fact of life. I think what's important is that, one, it's a team sport. It's not tennis, right? I'm a soccer guy, so for me it's soccer. But it's a team sport, and in each of the positions or roles, you need to find a champion. Someone who understands that organization, understands the problems of the organization, but most importantly has deep relationships in that organization, because that's how you can affect change. You get enough of not a groundswell, but enough of a buy-in from the different groups that the change begins to happen. And so that would be my one thought, is that it's definitely a team sport.
Anyone else that faced any resistance by chance?
We use Oracle. Oracle is our ERP, and we still have a few people that think that everything should be in Oracle. And it was the same way with CRM not 10 years ago, I guess. But how many people are putting leads in Oracle now? Hopefully not too many. Yeah. We put them in Salesforce.com, right? And so we have a lot of scenarios where we're putting things into Oracle that are like locking, we call locking IDs, or pieces of hardware or whatever that no one has ever, third-party hardware, third-party software that no one's ever bought. I mean, there's no transactional value to it. So I think we're just getting to the point now where maybe not everything has to be in Oracle. And so that's a battle I'm fighting right now.
I think a lot of the resistance that we've been dealing with, and what I expect we'll be dealing with going forward, is we have a lot of pockets of development, R&D teams. We've got 45 locations, probably 30 of those have R&D teams in them, and every one of them has an engineer who says, I could write the code necessary to create that license in a day. Why should I use Gemalto? And it's having that conversation over and over and over again with all of the different engineers, and getting buy-in at whatever levels you have to get up to get them to get on board and use the standardized tool. Fortunately, we've got a relatively slow-moving train in terms of software, but it's only going to pick up speed. And we've got to get a couple of wins under our belt using Gemalto and get a couple of the R&D teams on board to say, yeah, this actually made my life better, and show how it gives benefit all the way down the pipeline before it'll become easy. It's not going to be easy for a long time.
Tom, from a C-level perspective, everything easy cheesy, or yeah?
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll bring up something that isn't internal at all, and I think this came up in one of the discussions this morning. But as far as moving from a perpetual license to a subscription license, the outside sales compensation is huge. So you can develop all these tools and create everything, and yet if the sales force doesn't think that they're going to be compensated equally, where they have the choice of, okay, I can sell this and I get paid up front, or the customer's paying every month, am I getting paid every month? I'm going to pick this one over here. I'm going to get everything up front. And that is huge for us. It's not just coming up with that model that our own internal salespeople are comfortable with, but then it's educating the channel as well, and making sure that the channel is compensating the channel salesperson in a comparable way, so that then they either feel it's equal or they feel it's better. If you're trying to drive everyone to subscription, then make it more lucrative for the salesperson to sell that option. And that was a big, that was as big a project as all the implementation stuff. And I can't say that we've completely solved it yet. We have internally, but the independent partners, that's harder. We don't control what they do. We can just encourage them.
Absolutely. Again, on resistance, was there anyone you asked for help other than your spouse or typical colleagues kind of in difficult situations? Any resource where you would say, if you're stuck in this process and you don't know, how to maneuver through, this is a good idea, this is someone to turn to, internally, externally, whatever. Was there anyone that helped you in a critical moment of your project?
Well, I have two answers to that question. One is Bill, who happens to be sitting next to us. I have to give him a shout out because we met him here last year, and then he took the time to sit down and do an extended version of his presentation for us because working through channels, hardware, there was a lot of similarity there. And so what that allowed us to do is we have these seasonal, global meetings with the product teams that kind of drive the change in the organization. And we shared snippets of that taping session with them. And it was really helpful to, paint the long arc, right? That's the chain that I was talking about this morning because it kind of shows where you could end up. And I think it was your GPS systems that had different, that was the key that kind of resonated a little bit. Frankly, I think half the people that walked out of that room, probably more than half, 75, forgot about it 2 seconds later as they went back to their day jobs, but at least they had a piece in their head. So that was huge. And the second one is kind of what I said earlier is that, it's a team sport. So you got to find the person or persons within each group that understand it and see it and believe it. And you also need, continuing with the team analogy, the front office, right, to believe in the direction, right? Did any of you see Moneyball, by the way? I just saw that on the plane. Resaw it. If the front office, the manager didn't believe, but the front office believed, and eventually it paid off.
Well, I had a very lucky example. I think so we had all our business groups involved, basically, and we had one business group where we had a person that was able to rally a whole group of stakeholders together and do regular communication to them on what we were doing, how it was going to benefit their business, bringing the right people to the table for us. That was great help because if you're dealing with such a broad stakeholder group, such a broad organization, you need people, or I think you called them champions, right? Mm-hmm. You need champions in these organizations that are willing to contribute time to help you bring the message, to help you bring the right people to the table, and really engage actively on a regular basis. That helped us tremendously. Where other businesses hardly invested in that, and a lot had to come from the central group to go into these businesses, find the people, talk to them. So it was a huge accelerator for us.
Thank you. We're getting towards the end of the session, so final chance for you to share. If there's one piece of advice to share with all the other people that are going to go through a similar process, maybe that you wish you had gotten before you started the journey, and have learned the hard way. Is there any piece of advice you want to give the guys here? Yeah?
I don't know where Jim Kravczyk is, but he...
Over there.
We had Stephen Noel do a demonstration for us a couple weeks ago on RMS, and it was excellent, really good. And I think that he's going to do another one on the Sentinel Cloud in a week or two. Those kind of presentations, I think, are going to be invaluable for you if you get a chance to use Steve or some of the other guys. It worked out very well for us. It was very helpful.
Thank you. Yeah. Anything else?
I would just say the engagement of a senior leadership core team is really important, and that not only are they engaged, but they feel accountable to the deliverables that you're trying to bring is important. And I think that we had a very strong start. I think we had a shaky middle, and we're in a better place today. But some of that was about just change inside our own organization in terms of orgs and roles. But I think the accountability of the senior leadership that believes in what you're doing, whether it's to fund it or to support it or to resource it, is critical to being successful. And I felt it when it was good, and I felt it when it was bad. So it feels a lot better when it feels good.
I would add to that, yes, C-level is critical. That's the front office part, so to speak. 2 is the vision, right? The strategy. That's the trigger that overcomes inertia. But you got to keep feeding the beast, which means you got to show success. And you need the wins along the way, and you have to rally for those wins. And then it's a team sport, so everybody gets the credit if it goes well.
No, that's actually a good point. So, like, again, start small, try to create value early, then don't compromise on the vision, because, you know, sometimes the small stuff seems to not really be in line with what the future is about. And I think the other part really is that it's never going to be the way you expected it to go. It will never be that. So just and really find people that will go on this journey with you that can actually embrace that. Because there's a lot of people that cannot deal, and you know, with that type of change and that type of uncertainty. But if you find really bright people, you know, people that are willing to go the extra mile, open-minded, that helps the transformation tremendously. So if you can get people like that on your team, I guess you're quite blessed to do the transformation with them.
Thank you. Thank you all panelists. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah.